Hi, it's me, and welcome to yet another Limbus Company new ID overview. Project Moon has run out of archetypes that aren't burn to support, it seems, and has released two new burn triple-odd IDs for this week. The first is our second ID that combines burn and poise in Cinq Association East Section 3 Don Quixote, our first Season 0 burn ID that isn't from the Liu Association, so you can get her with shards right now. We also have Firefist Office Survivor Gregor, a Season 5 ID that exists because so many people voiced that they wanted it to that Project Moon decided to oblige. He did cost me all of my lunacy and extraction tickets to get though, so I will treat him like dirt, just as Gregor is accustomed to. It's also the first time in the game's lifespan that a Sinner has gotten two seasonal IDs of the triple-aught rarity from the same season, which is a bit strange. I advise waiting a week to use Ego Shards on him unless you are a die-hard Gregor stan. Without any further ado, let's get into their kits. Both of our new IDs this week come with new status effects, and Cinq Association East Section 3 Don Quixote's is called Nerve Strike. This status is very similar to Cinq Morceau's Focused Attack. Dawn gains power based on the stack of the effect, it stacks up to 3, and it expires if she inflicts it to a different target or if another ally inflicts their own nerve strike. The difference is that it applies to the entire enemy rather than just one skill slot, but has a trade-off of only gaining base power instead of coin power when at its maximum stack. This status is inflicted when her passive is fueled once per turn against the target that Dawn hit last with a base skill. Her passive is also her only source of haste gain, giving 1 for every 3 poise that she has up to 2. She also gains extra crit damage against enemies based on their burn, and the cap on how much this increase can be is increased by 5% for every stack of nerve strike on the target, up to a maximum of 30% extra crit damage. She's definitely a payoff ID for burn, and will require some assistance to maintain her poise consistently, but works well on her own too. But, if you don't want to bring her, her support passive is great for burn teams, giving the fastest ally some haste on Clash Win if the target has burn. This is the fastest burn ID by herself, and being able to support the middling speed of other burn IDs is actually a really big bonus. Don Quixote's defense skill, Thou'rt in dire need of a lesson in table manners, is a 4-14 rolling Wrath evade that can become a 4-16 if she is fast enough compared to her target. While evades are rare on burn IDs, and having a Wrath defense skill helps a lot for triggering resonance, it kinda stinks that this doesn't do anything with burn. Still, it's a very powerful defensive tool for this ID. Fa Jin is a 3-11 rolling Pierce Gluttony skill with 2 coins, but can become up to a 3-15 if she is fast enough compared to her target. It gains a high amount of poise count, which is always helpful for a poise ID, and Gluttony skills are at a very high premium in burn team composition, so she's very valuable for sin generation in both poise and burn teams. However, it's also her only way to inflict burn count, and only on critical hit, which is a little bit awkward for her consistency in helping to inflict burn. Virescent Flame Palm is a 4-16 rolling Pierce Wrath skill with 3 coins that can become up to a 4-22 if her speed is high enough compared to her targets. This skill is her bread and butter, inflicting a good amount of burn while also granting a good amount of poise and poise count after a clash. In addition, once per turn, she can inflict up to 8 defense level down onto a target based on their burn and nerve strike, though they need at least 6 burn to inflict any at all. This combined with her speed is basically inflicting 2 fragile on whatever target you want for the turn, which is really powerful. Since most of your other burn members are going to be slower, they will usually be able to take advantage of it. Plus, with all the Wrath damage effects that Burn Ego can apply, this will usually help quite a bit for your raw damage output. Prithee, Let This Be an Enlightening Bout is a 4-16 rolling Pierce Pride skill with 4 coins that can become up to a 4-24 if her speed is fast enough compared to the targets. Let me just save you the trouble for everyone and just say that unless you're fighting Envy Pecatolum, you'll basically always get the full conditionals on all her skills. Enemies are just not naturally fast enough for it to matter. This skill gains additional bonuses if the target already has Nerve Strike, so it isn't your best opener on her kit. The ability to gain 3 or more poise on Clash Win, as well as to inflict 3 defense level down, about 1 fragile, is going to be useful, so you'll want to make sure that the target actually has Nerve Strike. Plus, it gains more damage for every level of Nerve Strike on the target, making it a pretty good finisher. That said, it is less versatile than her skill 2 overall, since most of its conditionals rely on a status that takes up to 3 turns to build up. You may expect me to recommend bringing Lifetime Stew for Ego on this idea as a way to supplement her very poor burn count infliction, but since Lust is becoming less common on burn IDs, I actually think it isn't as good of a choice. She can't fuel it at all, and the passive will eat away at your ego resources over time. Instead, she best fuels stuff like Wishing Cairn and Yearning Merkala, though it doesn't perfectly fuel any of her own ego at this time. Wishing Cairn could potentially give her a small boost to her poise generation since it inflicts bleed, and Yearning Merkala does insanely high damage even without a lot of Blood Feast consumed. Both ego provide decent benefits, so bringing them with will never be a bad idea. Moving on now to the ID with more restrictive obtainability, we have Firefist Office Survivor Gregor and his 2 new statuses, District 12 Fuel and Overheated Fuel. This is actually just one new status wrapped up like it's 2. District 12 Fuel becomes Overheated Fuel when at 50 or less. You start combat with 100, and it is just used as a consumable for your skills to apply different effects, having no effects by itself. However, the more fuel that Gregor consumes during battle, the more damage he will deal, up to a maximum of 40% more damage, which is crazy high, though it is on a resonance passive, so that helps to balance it out. If the target has 30 or more burn in burn count, or if they are a Blood Fiend or Blood Bag, this cap raises to 60% and increases by an additional 0.1% per fuel consumed as well. It's an incredibly big damage boost that makes this ID surprisingly strong despite his low number of coins overall. Additionally, as long as his fuel isn't literally at 0, whenever Gregor staggers or defeats an enemy with 3+ Wrath Resonance, he will inflict 2 burn count onto 2 enemies with the least burn. Yes, this ID is basically just a much better Liu Merceau, as he focuses on spreading burn across the enemies instead of just the target. His support passive can be helpful, but is maybe a bit specific. 5% more damage for Wrath skills specifically for every 6 burn on the target is pretty nice, but only capping at 20% means it'll take a while for it to take full effect. You'll probably better off using one of that many healing support passives on Gregor if you aren't bringing him in the active party. I have to keep going for Big Sis is Gregor's defense skill. It's a 9-16 rolling Blunt Gloom clashable counter with a single coin, which by itself provides an insanely consistent clashing tool early on in a battle. Additionally, using it fully restores your District 12 fuel at the start of combat. I don't know why they made this counter clashable. It rolls way higher than his skill 1 and even outclashes it with full conditionals. Regardless, I wouldn't be surprised if you use this quite a bit, as it'll keep his field topped off in longer fights pretty easily, and his third Sin affinity is locked behind his counter this time since 2 of his skills have the same affinity. Flame Throw is a 3-11 rolling Blunt Lust skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 3-15 if the target has enough burn. This is probably the single best skill in the entire game for inflicting burn count on a single target, inflicting 2 while being the most common skill in his arsenal. Yes, this ID may be the single best at propagating burn across all enemies in the entire game, and that isn't an understatement. If you have trouble with burn count infliction, Firefist Office Gregor will almost single-handedly solve the issue. I'll burn away every last drop of your filthy blood. Seriously, why is this skill named like this? Is a 4-16 rolling Blunt Wrath skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 4-20 if the target has enough burn. Both coins consume District 12 fuel in order to spread burn across your enemies, with the first inflicting potency and the second inflicting count. This can actually apply to the target of the skill as one of the targets for the effect, so this skill can potentially inflict 4 burn with 4 count as long as the target has no burn when you first use it. Additionally, coins on this skill that consume fuel will deal 15% more damage, or 30% more damage while in overheated fuel. These coins will consume your fuel without question. Makes me wonder why this conditional even exists in the first place. Firefist is a 5-17 rolling Blunt Wrath skill with 3 coins that can become as high as an 8-26 if the target has a high enough burn and burn count. Additionally, it consumes up to 25 fuel to deal up to as much as 100% more damage, depending on how much fuel was consumed and if he's in overheated state. This is an insane damage conditional that is just randomly doubled on the final coin, making this skill deal frankly absurd damage with almost no conditional to speak of. It can only inflict burn and burn count if the skill consumes fuel. Why this skill would ever not consume fuel when it can consume a minimum of 1 is besides me. Also, if the target is defeated, Gregor can gain 2 blunt damage up next turn, but this conditional also applies if the skill consumes any fuel. Again, why would this skill ever not consume fuel when it can consume a minimum of 1? Why would you ever be in a position where this skill wouldn't consume fuel? This is one of the most broken skills in the entire game, because all of its conditionals are pretty much always active. The only situation where they won't be is if you use it at exactly 0 fuel, and even if you're at 0 at turn start, the counter fully refuels it at combat start, so there's really nothing to worry about. If there's one thing this ID doesn't excel at, it's fueling Gregor's ego. That being said, he does perfectly fuel 2 of them thanks to his counter. Suddenly One Day is a pretty high-rolling skill, and despite its RNG nature, it is the only ego that Gregor has which inflicts burn. He also has the ability to provide SP support since he perfectly fuels Bygone Days. While neither are best in the burn team, SP regeneration is still pretty valuable for most teams, so it'll be a great help for this ID in particular. These IDs both excel in a proper burn setup that's capable of maintaining burn count, so any team with Firefist Gregor, really. The Liu IDs from Yisang, Ishmael, Rodian, and Ryoshu all work incredibly well with them due to their passive access to burn ego, as well as being our most consistent burn units nowadays. Plus, Gregor's insane count infliction helps to offset the count reducing effects of Yisang and Rodian's skill 3s. Gregor additionally provides additional SP support for both Dawn Office Sinclair and Magic Bullet Otis. These are still going to be very valuable IDs in the team due to their particulars, though Gregor may honestly inflict enough count to make Dawn Sinclair not entirely necessary unless you really want the AoE skill he has. Even then, you won't need it in any boss fight without multiple targets. That said, it'll hurt your envy generation quite a bit. LCE Ego Faust is still very good as a lead to generate a bunch of resources before self-destructing and switching to a new ID. Cinq East Don Quixote is actually a fantastic unit to substitute into for longer fights, and I would say that it is her preferred position if you have both of these IDs. Other IDs that work well with these new ones but don't directly count as burn IDs include any ID that gains bonuses based on the number of unique statuses on the enemy. Cinq East Don Quixote specifically can apply burn, defense level down, and nerve strike, which all count towards the reroll effects of Ring Yisang and Ring Otis. They work great together, and their guaranteed bleed infliction helps to trigger the passive of Dawn Wishing Cairn a lot more often. And speaking of bleed, Kurakumo, Ishmael, and Heathcliff are powerful IDs who deal more damage based on how many status effects are on the target. While not as busted as the ring IDs, bringing these two together makes them both very powerful, and lust skills are common enough on burn units that it should still be reasonable to activate Dark Cloud Blade every turn to make them even stronger. Plus, Kurakumo Ishmael will fix your envy issue pretty much by herself. Lastly, it's worth mentioning Pequod Ishmael. While not great as a burn unit, she pairs pretty well with Cinq East Don Quixote to give her more poise using her skills. Plus, burn teams are pretty good at triggering Pride and Wrath Resonance, so the additional skill from Assist Attack is going to be very consistent. Also, she inflicts bleed to help trigger Wishing Cairn once again. And that's about all I have to say about these new burn IDs. It feels like just yesterday that I was constantly asking for more burn support, and in the matter of a few weeks, we now have burn on 11 out of 12 Sinner IDs, making it more common than sinking somehow. Still, I'm glad that my favorite archetype is finally getting the love it needs, and somehow became meta seemingly overnight. Seriously, burn IDs are probably the second best archetype behind bleed right now, at least in terms of what's good in Refraction Railplay 5. In any case, thank you all for watching. I'd appreciate if you liked the video and subscribe since it helps me out a lot, and you should comment below with your thoughts on these new IDs. If you want a chance to use them before pulling or sharding, you can always add me in-game to test them out, as I have them fully leveled and equipped. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon.